Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today's tale takes us aboard a Royal Navy patrol boat where rank meets reality in the best way possible. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. He chewed me out for calling out his mistakes. I fed them back to him line by line. Superior officer wouldn't take criticism, forced to eat words in a dish served cold. During the early 2000s, I was the chief engineer equivalent on a Royal Navy patrol boat as a warrant officer too. The hierarchy of the boat was the captain was a lieutenant commander, the executive officer known as XO, a senior lieutenant, various other officers such as navigator and gunnery, but the marine and weapon heads of department were senior rates enlisted. At this point, I'd been serving around 16 years and had a lot of experience in engineering as a whole, instruction of trainees, firefighting and damage control, and how to get things done. The XO had been serving maybe 6 years and considered himself to be an expert in everybody else's field. Every piece of paperwork generated had to pass his desk for him to pick it apart and change it in some way. He insisted on making an evening broadcast on the Tannoy every day in which he would recap the day's activities and lay out the next. This became known as ums and ahs for Mars bars, as the crew of around 40 used to sweepstake behind his back on how much waffling he would do with the winner getting a Mars bar donated by the canteen. In short, he was self-important, vain, and a bully. Every day on a warship, there's some kind of mandated activity, fire exercise, or man overboard drill, machinery drill, steering failure, etc., etc. XO was in charge of the firefighting and damage control. I was the advisor. After every drill, we'd have a hot debrief in which we'd find self-fault, find to improve the process. It was important that everybody heard the problems to assist with the solution. After one drill, when it was my turn to critique, I laid out some errors others had committed, then addressed the failings of the XO, i.e. lack of communication, improper procedure, rust action, and poor timing of support activity. He blew an absolute fuse and hauled me into his cabin for an arse chewing because I'd inappropriately called him out on his failings and criticized him in front of juniors. I've had my arse chewed by better than him for actual misdeeds, but it rankled as what I'd done was common practice for this sort of activity. The whole boat knew I'd been chewed, but I was stoic about it. We had General mucking about with his marking of our paperwork by putting in errors on purpose to see if he could find them and marking his and sending them to the captain. Eventually, about 6 months later, the boat was to be sold to a foreign navy, so we had to prepare. XO was determined to make it as seamless as possible, and all computer passwords had to be put to a generic one for handover. XO was also the person who wrote my personal reports for promotion, etc. He drafted the captain's comments for him to sign, and also there was a matrix of expected and achieved scores for a variety of topics. If your expected score was a B but achieved was C, there had to be reasoning in the text. The day before handover, I was duty officer and happened to find my report on a computer with a generic login as it was due for me to read and sign it the next day before moving to my next role. It was as bad as it was possible to be. I went through it with a fine-toothed comb, picking out every spelling error, falsehood, and mismatch in expected and achieved scores. The next day, I was summoned for a meeting to read it, and I refused to sign it until I had a meeting with the captain. I went through line by line, pointing out every error, etc., and asked for redress. The skipper was fairly horrified at the report, and it was changed to my satisfaction. The XO was carpeted by captain in a rather vocal display, albeit behind closed doors, but enough hurt it, especially me, as I knew to be adjacent to his cabin so I could gloat. Side note to the story, possibly better, the boat went to Spain for a decommissioning trip. XO invited himself to the Seaman Branch drinking session ashore and thought they were all drinking tequila slammers. Turns out only his shot glass had tequila in it, and he was poured into a taxi after 45 minutes and had to be carried over the gangway back on board, where he subsequently threw up all over his cabin. I hate those a-holes who like to play ID card poker. Yeah, I get it. You outrank me and you're going to win every argument. Fortunately, you had an ace up your sleeve and knew when to play it. Well done. And our second story. Karen tore down our fence without permission. This happened a few years ago, and while it all started innocently enough with a fence replacement, things quickly escalated into something crazy. My dad, a man who prided himself on peaceful living and keeping to himself, had been in the house I grew up in for decades. We had the same neighbors for a long time, but there was one neighbor in particular, let's just say she was a character. Karen, as we referred to her, was eccentric to the point of being unpredictable and just a bit too involved in everyone else's business. I'd been accustomed to her quirks, but what happened next threw me for a loop. It all started one summer afternoon when I was home, and I could hear a lot of commotion coming from the backyard next door. I looked out the window, and to my horror, I saw that Karen had decided to tear down the old fence that separated our properties. Just like that, no warning. She was ripping out what remained of the dilapidated fence. No thought of asking us for permission, or at least discussing it. Now, the fence was indeed in rough shape and needed replacing, but here's the kicker. My dad and I had been meaning to take care of it for a while. The thing was, Karen's dogs, all 5 of them, had been sneaking through those gaps in the fence, running rampant in our yard, leaving behind a trail of destruction, pooping all over my dad's meticulously tended garden and digging up his plants. We'd been planning on putting up a better fence for months. But now, with Karen taking matters into her own hands, it seemed like she had declared a war over property lines. I called my dad and told him what was going on. He was annoyed, but not surprised. After all, Karen wasn't exactly known for following the rules. He told me to stay calm, and when he got home, we'd figure out how to handle it. When my dad got home, he saw the string Karen had laid out on the ground, trying to mark where she thought the property line was. The thing is, Karen didn't exactly have the best grasp on where her property ended and ours began. The string was clearly about a foot over the line into our yard. Of course, my dad, being the logical and calm person that he is, grabbed a string of his own and marked what he knew to be the correct line. Now this is where the real fun begins. My dad, ever the peacemaker, decided to go over to Karen's house to have a polite conversation about it. He wasn't angry, just wanted to clear things up. But Karen, being Karen, was not receptive. She immediately started yelling at him, accusing him of trying to take away her yard and going on and on about how she was sure she was in the right. After a lot of back and forth and some escalating tensions, they decided to call in a city official to come out and settle the issue once and for all. This is when Karen's world really started to crumble. The city official showed up, took one look at the situation, and confirmed what we already knew. Karen's fence wasn't in the right spot. She'd actually built it on our property, and as it turned out, the original builders of our neighborhood had made a mistake when they put up the first fence. Karen had no leg to stand on. She was furious, but the law was on our side, and there was nothing she could do about it. My dad smiled to himself as he watched Karen's face fall when the official told her she was wrong. Karen, being Karen, didn't take it well, but after she had no choice but to acknowledge the truth, she begrudgingly agreed to have the fence moved. It wasn't even a small matter. It was a major hassle for her to take it down and rebuild it. And of course, because Karen had to get the last word in, she made sure to sulk and complain the entire time. At the end of the day, we got our rightful space back, the fence was rebuilt, the property line was clearly marked, and our garden was once again safe from her 5 wild dogs. Things seemed to settle down after that, but I'm sure Karen still muttered under her breath about it for weeks. When the city official shows up, takes one look and goes, "Yeah, no, Karen, you're on their land." That must have been the most satisfying moment in suburban history. Honestly, I'd frame a picture of her face that day and hang it on the new fence, just as a little family heirloom. And our last story. Don't take someone's shoveled parking spot unless you're prepared to hand dig your way out. First, a little background. This was a few years ago when I was a senior in college. I'd moved into a townhouse with a disproportionately small open parking lot behind the row of townhomes. I'm talking gravel with space enough for perhaps 5 cars. You did require a pass, but our landlord had given out far too many for the lot size. But the next housing over had a fence leaning into the lot, so if a car did not pull forward far enough once parked, you could not drive around them to park. I drove a 4x4 SUV at the time, so routinely I parked partly in the grass to allow for more room for the smaller cars. This was also a troublesome lot when it snowed, and boy did it snow up there. which is what begins my terror reign on my douche nozzle neighbors. Story time. Bear with me, it's a long one. I just finished up finals for the semester and was waiting on my aunt to drive to my complex from a couple states over so we could make the rest of the journey for the holidays to my parents' house together to save gas money. This was when it was around $3.98 a gallon. However, a blizzard had started up and the weather was quickly becoming treacherous. I waited until the thick of it was mostly over before I went out with a shovel to clear a spot for my aunt's two-wheel drive car in the lot so her car would be safe while we were away. I spent 2 hours in the freezing snow making room for her. While not law, obviously, generally the rule is you dug it out, it's yours. Well, not long after, I got a call from my mom saying my aunt had run out of gas because of traffic stopping with no stations in sight, so I loaded up 2 cans and headed out into the storm. It was now passing farther east, and she was stuck in it. She wasn't far away, but it was 45 minutes just to get to her due to the condition of the roads. Minor tangent, if you're going downhill and the road is empty, you can pull the e-brake and have some fun sliding sideways, LOL. So I get to her and fill her up, and we head back with her following my tracks. Fast forward, we're pulling up to my lot. I gave her my pass, and I was going to park on the street, and this a-hole had taken the spot I dug out. She was the only car there, as everyone else had already gone home for the holidays. She could have parked anywhere else. She also had parked far enough back to block the entire rest of the lot, so my aunt parks on the street and I let her in the house to get warm, but I'm pissed. What kind of jerk does this? Suddenly I realize I'm the only one with a shovel here, and a dark idea begins to take shape in my mind. You want that spot so badly? Fine, take it, it's yours. Forever. I grabbed my shovel, it's dark by now, and head outside. I carefully shovel all of the snow I dug out back around their car. For good measure, I add snow from around most of the rest of the lot. I bury their car up over the trunk and hood. I feel accomplished, and over the cover of darkness, take my shovel back inside and wait for the morning. The next day, I hear angry cursing and rush to my kitchen window to look out back. My neighbor is furiously trying to get in their car and then trying to back out of their snow hell. I make coffee and sip it, giggling while they realize they'll have to dig their car out, and since they have no shovel, they have to do it with their hands. Never take a spot someone else worked hard to shovel out. They eventually did get free, and I made a new shovel space right away for my aunt. We had a lovely holiday with my parents where there was no snow after. Edit. For clarification, while parking on the street is usually fine, people have a tendency to vandalize cars in that neighborhood with out-of-state plates. Much safer in the lot. When it comes to snow, people are jerks. It's common courtesy to not take a space you didn't clear. How anyone can claim they didn't know that is beyond me. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.